He called my work fluff in front of the entire executive team. That's fine. I don't raise my voice. I sharpen my knives. 6 weeks. That's how long I'd spent crafting the perfect strategic analysis for a $30 million contract. Every data point meticulously sourced, every projection battle-tested. And this overpaid peacock in his Armani suit dismissed it with a wave of his manicured hand. PowerPoint fluff, he'd said, that smirk playing at his lips like he'd just delivered the wittiest line at a cocktail party. The room went silent. 20 pairs of eyes darted between us, waiting for the explosion. They don't know me very well. My name is Harper Langston, and I've spent 12 years climbing the ladder in corporate America without ever losing my composure. Not once. Not when male colleagues talked over me in meetings. Not when I discovered I was making 30% less than my incompetent predecessor. Not even when the CEO's nephew got promoted over me despite having the strategic vision of a goldfish. But sitting in that glass-walled conference room on the 42nd floor of our Manhattan office, watching Ethan Brooks, our newly minted CMO, who'd been with the company all of 3 months, dismiss 6 weeks of my work as PowerPoint fluff, I felt something shift inside me. The presentation deck lay open on the mahogany table, its carefully crafted pages now seeming to mock me. Each slide represented hours of analysis, countless late nights cross-referencing market data, building predictive models that could actually deliver results. The Vanguard Dynamics account wasn't just another client, it was a $30 million opportunity that could reshape our entire strategic consulting division. I think what Harper's trying to say, Ethan continued, his voice dripping with that particular brand of condescension that only Ivy League MBAs seem to master, is that we need less academic theory and more real-world application. He adjusted his gold cufflinks Cartier, of course, and smiled at the room like he'd just solved world hunger. Academic theory. The man who'd spent his entire career repackaging other people's ideas into digestible sound bites was calling my data-driven analysis academic theory. I kept my face neutral, a skill I'd perfected over years of corporate warfare. Inside, I was cataloging every micro-expression around the table. Jennifer from finance looked uncomfortable, her pen tapping against her notepad. Marcus from operations was studying his phone, clearly wanting no part of this public execution. Even our CEO, Richard Blackstone, seemed more interested in the view of Central Park than in Ethan's grandstanding. "I'll be taking point on the Vanguard presentation myself," Ethan announced, gathering my deck with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never had to earn anything. "Harper, you can assist with making the slides more visually appealing. Maybe add some of those animated transitions the clients seem to love." Animated transitions. I'd just been reduced from Chief Data Strategy Officer to PowerPoint decorator. "Of course," I heard myself say, my voice steady as granite. "I'm happy to support however you need." The meeting dissolved into the usual chaos of scraping chairs and small talk. I stayed seated, methodically packing my leather portfolio while my mind raced through possibilities. Ethan Brooks had no idea what he'd just done. He saw a middle-aged woman in a Ann Taylor suit and sensible heels, someone he could steamroll on his path to whatever C-suite glory he imagined for himself. He didn't see the Harvard MBA hidden behind my understated appearance. He didn't know about my relationship with certain key players at Vanguard Dynamics. Most importantly, he didn't understand that in the world of high-stakes consulting, information was ammunition, and I'd been stockpiling for years. As the conference room emptied, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't messaged in months. Camille Wright, CTO of Vanguard Dynamics, my former mentor, the woman who'd taught me that the best revenge isn't loud or dramatic, it's precise, strategic, and devastating. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for just a moment before I typed, "Heads up, wasn't allowed to vet the deck. Expect fluff." 3 dots appeared immediately. Camille was typing. Then, "Interesting. He has no idea who I am. Does he?" "None whatsoever," I replied. "Perfect. Let him ruin himself. I'll be ready when it happens." I slipped my phone back into my purse and stood, smoothing my skirt. Through the glass walls, I could see Ethan holding court by the espresso machine, his animated gestures suggesting he was already spinning the narrative of how he'd saved the Vanguard account from my overly complex approach. Let him talk. Let him preen. Let him walk into that presentation room at Vanguard thinking his MBA and his expensive suits would carry the day. Camille Wright had built her reputation on detecting and destroying corporate bullshitters. She'd once fired a vendor mid-presentation for using the phrase synergistic optimization without being able to define it. Ethan Brooks was about to learn what happened when you dismiss the wrong person's work as fluff, and I'd have a front-row seat to watch it all unfold. The partnership between Camille Wright and me went back 8 years, to when I was just another analyst drowning in spreadsheets at McKenna and Associates. She'd been brought in as a guest lecturer for our advanced data modeling seminar, a favor to our CEO who'd been trying to court Vanguard's business for years. I still remember that first lecture. While my colleagues were busy trying to impress her with their pedigrees and their jargon, I'd asked a simple question about the reliability of predictive modeling in emerging markets. She'd paused mid-sentence, really looked at me for the first time, and said, "Finally, someone who understands that data without context is just expensive noise." After the seminar, she'd found me in the parking garage. "You're wasted here," she'd said, handing me her business card. "When you're ready to do real work, call me." I'd waited 2 years before making that call, but when I did, she remembered. She brought me in as a consultant on 3 different Vanguard projects, each one teaching me something new, not about data. I already knew that, but about power. How to read a room, how to translate complex analysis into language that made C-suite executives lean forward instead of checking their phones. Most importantly, how to recognize the difference between people who created value and people who just repackaged it. "The world is full of Ethan Brookses," she'd told me over whiskey at the St. Regis one evening. "Pretty packages with nothing inside. They survive because most people are too polite or too busy to call them out. Don't be most people. Harper." Now, sitting at my desk the morning after Ethan's presentation, I thought about those words. He'd strutted into the office like nothing had happened, already spinning the story. "Tough crowd at Vanguard," I'd heard him tell Richard. "Might not be the right fit for our capabilities anyway." Our capabilities, the same capabilities he'd dismissed as fluff just days ago. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number, but I recognized the cadence immediately. "Daniels is booked. Let's make it Meridian instead. Same time. Bring your appetite for more than food. C." Meridian was Camille's power lunch spot, where she'd sealed deals that reshaped entire industries. The fact that she'd chosen it for our meeting meant something was in motion, something big. I spent the rest of the morning in a performance of perfect subordination. I reformatted Ethan's slides for his next victim. I smiled when he asked me to fetch coffee for his 10 a.m. meeting. I even nodded sympathetically when he complained about Vanguard's outdated thinking. "They just don't understand modern marketing dynamics," he said, lounging in his ergonomic chair while I stood by his desk like a servant. "It's all about the narrative, Harper, the story, not just numbers on a page." "Of course," I agreed, my voice bland as oatmeal. "The story is everything." He missed the irony entirely, too busy admiring his own reflection in his monitor to notice mine. Jennifer from finance stopped by my office after lunch. "Heard about Vanguard," she said, closing the door behind her. "Also heard Ethan's trying to blame you for the deck." I looked up from my screen, keeping my expression mild. "Is he telling everyone you insisted on keeping it too technical, that he tried to add more vision but you pushed back?" She shifted uncomfortably. "I know that's bullshit, Harper. We all do. Your work is always—" "It's fine," I cut her off gently. "Let him tell whatever story he needs to tell." She frowned. "You're not going to fight back." "I don't need to fight, Jennifer. The truth has a way of surfacing on its own." After she left, I returned to my screen, but I wasn't looking at slides anymore. I was reviewing my employment contract, specifically the non-compete clauses and client relationship provisions. Camille had taught me well before you make any move. Understand every piece on the board. My personal phone, the one the company didn't monitor, buzzed again. This time it was an email, from Camille, but not from her Vanguard address. This came from Wright Strategic Ventures, her private consulting firm. The subject line was just 3 words, "ready to fly." Attached was a single document, a job offer that made my current salary look like pocket change. Chief Strategy Officer, full equity participation. and a signing bonus that would let me buy that brownstone in Brooklyn I'd been eyeing for years. But it was the final line that made me smile for the first time all week. Staffing needs immediate requirement for 3-5 senior analysts. Your recommendations welcome. I thought about my team, the ones who'd stayed late helping me build that Vanguard deck, the ones who actually understood what we did, the ones Ethan had been trying to push out to make room for his visionaries. Tomorrow's lunch wasn't just about my future, it was about theirs too. I closed the email and deleted it, then went back to reformatting Ethan's meaningless slides. Let him think he'd won. Let him believe he'd put me in my place. Camille had taught me the most important lesson of all: the best checkmate is the one your opponent never sees coming. The Vanguard Dynamics headquarters loomed against the gray November sky, all steel and glass precision. I sat in the back of the Lincoln Town Car, watching Ethan fidget with his tie in the reflection of his phone screen. He'd insisted on the car service. Of course, appearances matter, he'd said, as if Camille Wright gave a damn about anything beyond results. The conference room on the 53rd floor was exactly as I remembered: stark white walls, a single piece of abstract art that looked like controlled chaos, and a table so polished you could see your own doubt reflected back at you. Camille had designed it this way. Nowhere to hide, she'd told me once. I want to see exactly who I'm dealing with. Ethan strode in like he owned the place, all swagger and false confidence. I followed 3 steps behind, carrying his laptop bag like the assistant he'd reduced me to. The Vanguard team was already assembled. Camille at the head of the table, flanked by her CFO James Morrison and head of strategic development, Patricia Liu. Not one smile among them. Ms. Wright. Ethan extended his hand with that 1,000-watt smile that had probably opened doors his whole life. Ethan Brooks, CMO, excited to show you what we've prepared. Camille's handshake was brief, perfunctory. Her eyes found mine for a split second, the faintest flicker of acknowledgement before returning to Ethan. We have 45 minutes. I trust you'll make them count. The first slide appeared a swirl of meaningless graphics and the phrase "synergistic digital transformation journey" in 72-point font. I watched Camille's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Ethan launched into his presentation with the enthusiasm of a tent revival preacher. Vanguard Dynamics isn't just a company, he proclaimed, clicking to a slide featuring a stock photo of people high-fiving in suits. It's a digital revolution waiting to happen, and we're here to be your transformation partners on this journey to excellence. Empty phrases tumbled out like coins from a broken slot machine. Paradigm shifts, disruptive innovation, best-in-class solutions, each buzzword hanging in the air like a bad smell. The slide deck I'd spent 6 weeks perfecting had been butchered, my carefully researched data points replaced with clip art and meaningless pie charts. 20 minutes in, Camille raised a hand. The room fell silent. Mr. Brooks? Her voice was winter wind through bare trees. Slide 17. You show projected efficiency gains of 34%. What's your baseline metric? Ethan's smile flickered. He clicked back to the slide, a garish thing with animated arrows pointing upward. Well, that's based on industry standards and... Which industry standards? The general consulting framework suggests... Mr. Brooks? Camille leaned forward, and I saw Ethan actually take a half step back. I have a PhD in data science from MIT. I've built 3 companies from scratch. I can smell bullshit from 3 floors away. So I'll ask once more, what is your baseline metric for that 34% efficiency gain? The silence stretched like taffy. Ethan's mouth opened and closed, a fish drowning in air. His eyes darted to me, desperate, but I kept my expression carefully neutral, hands folded in my lap like a good little assistant. Harper might have those specific details. Harper wasn't allowed to present, Camille cut him off. You made that quite clear in your email, so I'm asking you. James Morrison cleared his throat. Perhaps we should move on to the implementation timeline. There won't be an implementation. Camille closed her leather portfolio with a snap that echoed like a gunshot. Mr. Brooks, you've just wasted 30 minutes of my time with what I can only describe as the most vapid collection of corporate nonsense I've encountered this year. And that's saying something. Ethan's face had gone from red to white to a sickly green. Ms. Right, if you just let me explain. Explain what? How you took what I assume was Harper's meticulously researched analysis and turned it into this PowerPoint karaoke session. She stood, and her team followed suit like a well-trained army. We're done here. As they filed toward the door, Camille paused. Her eyes found mine again, and this time she didn't hide the small smile playing at her lips. Harper, walk with me. I rose, leaving Ethan standing alone by his laptop, still displaying a slide titled Leveraging Tomorrow's Solutions Today. In the hallway, Camille's heels clicked against marble like a countdown timer. Lunch tomorrow, she asked quietly. Daniels, 1 o'clock. I'll be there. She squeezed my shoulder once before disappearing into the executive elevator. I stood there for a moment, savoring the view of Manhattan spread below, before returning to collect my boss. I found Ethan slumped in a conference room chair, tie askew, staring at his failed presentation. Pack up, I said, my voice professionally neutral. The car's waiting. He looked up at me with something between rage and bewilderment. You knew she'd hate it. I picked up his laptop, closing it with deliberate care. You're right, Ethan, I did know, because unlike you, I actually bothered to learn who Camille Wright is before walking into her conference room. The ride back to our office was silent except for the rain that had started to fall. Each drop on the window like a small celebration of justice served cold. Meridian occupied the penthouse of a building that scraped the Manhattan sky, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view that made you feel like you owned the city. Camille had chosen her usual table in the corner, where she could see everyone who entered while keeping her back protected. Old habits from her days disrupting Silicon Valley. She'd once told me. She stood when I arrived, something she rarely did for anyone. Today she wore Armani, charcoal gray and sharp enough to cut glass. Harper, you look well for someone whose work was just called Fluff. Amazing what a good night's sleep and a clear conscience can do, I replied, taking my seat. The waiter appeared as if summoned by thought alone. Camille ordered for both of us. She remembered I preferred the salmon and a bottle of Sancerre that cost more than most people's rent. Let's dispense with the pleasantries, she said once we were alone. I pulled the Vanguard contract this morning, the full $30 million. Richard Blackstone called me personally to beg for reconsideration. I told him to fire his CMO and maybe we'd talk. I kept my face neutral, but inside, satisfaction bloomed like a dark flower. That must have been an interesting conversation. Oh, he tried to throw you under the bus, of course. Said you'd been resistant to modernizing your approach. I asked him if by modernizing he meant replacing substance with sparkle. She smiled, predatory and elegant. He didn't have an answer for that. The wine arrived, Camille tasted it, nodded her approval, and waited for the waiter to disappear again. I'm building something new. Harper, something that makes Vanguard look like a startup. Wright Strategic Ventures is about to announce a major expansion. Financial services, healthcare, tech, all the sectors where data isn't just useful, it's existential. And you need someone who speaks both languages, I said. Data and executive. I need someone who can build me an army, she corrected. The offer I sent is just the beginning. I want to gut every major consulting firm of their real talent, the ones who actually understand what we do, not just the ones who can perform it in a boardroom. Our food arrived, but neither of us touched it yet. This was the real negotiation, the dance we'd both been preparing for. My non-compete runs for 18 months, I said carefully. Only for direct competitors in the consulting space. WSV is registered as a strategic investment firm. Completely different animal, legally speaking. She'd done her homework, as always. Besides, your contract has a fascinating loophole. If your employer materially changes your job responsibilities without compensation adjustment, the non-compete becomes void. I thought about Ethan reducing me to a PowerPoint assistant. Materially changes, like being demoted from strategic lead to slide decorator. Exactly like that. I had my lawyers review the security footage from your conference room. Amazing how good those cameras are these days. Every word crystal clear. The implications hung between us like a sword. She'd been planning this from the moment I'd sent that first text. The 3 analysts I want to bring. Sarah Chen, Marcus Washington, and David Kim, she interrupted. I've already had them vetted, stellar records, All of them, wasted under Brooke's leadership. I shouldn't have been surprised she knew their names, but Camille's network was legendary. They'll need signing bonuses commensurate with their value. Already approved. I want them starting within 2 weeks. She finally picked up her fork. The question is, do you have the stomach for what comes next? Which is controlled demolition. Ethan Brooks isn't just going to lose the Vanguard account. By the time we're done, he'll be unemployable in any firm worth its letterhead. Richard Blackstone will have to explain to his board how he let a preening peacock cost them their biggest client. And every competent analyst in that building will know exactly who opened the door for their escape. I thought about the 6 weeks of work dismissed as fluff, the public humiliation, the years of building relationships that Ethan had tried to claim as his own. When do I start? Camille raised her glass. Monday gives you 3 days to submit your resignation and watch the panic set in. I'd suggest doing it early Friday morning. Maximum chaos, minimum time for damage control. We clinked glasses, the crystal singing a note of perfect clarity. One more thing, she added. That brownstone in Brooklyn you've been watching on Zillow. The one on Remsen Street, my real estate agent says the sellers are motivated. Your signing bonus should more than cover the down payment. I nearly choked on my wine. How did you... Harper, darling, I know everything that matters about the people who matter to me. It's why I've never lost a battle I chose to fight. She smiled, warm this time, almost maternal. Welcome to the winning side. The rest of lunch was logistics, start dates, salary structures, strategic priorities, but underneath it all was the thrumming satisfaction of a plan coming together. Ethan Brooks thought he'd ended my career with a wave of his manicured hand. Instead, he'd lit the fuse on his own destruction. As we prepared to leave, Camille handed me a black card with only a phone number. My private line, the resignation letter needs to be perfect, short, professional, devastating in its implications. Send me a draft tonight. Walking back to the office, Manhattan buzzing around me, I felt the shift in my universe. In 3 days, I'd transformed from Harper Langston, undervalued data officer, to Harper Langston, architect of Ethan Brooks' professional demise. And I'd sleep like a baby every night afterward. Friday, 6:47 a.m. The office was a ghost town, just how I'd planned it. Only the security guard nodded as I badged in, carrying my leather tote, the same one I'd carried for 5 years, now holding only what truly mattered, my personal items and a single envelope. I'd spent Thursday in perfect performance mode, attended every meeting, smiled at Ethan's jokes, even complimented his new strategic framework for the Henderson account, another collection of meaningless buzzwords destined to fail. No one suspected a thing. The resignation letter was a masterpiece of professional restraint. Camille had been right, every word needed to be perfect. Dear Mr. Blackstone, please accept this letter as formal notification of my resignation from the position of Chief Data Strategy Officer, effective immediately. After careful consideration of recent changes to my role and responsibilities, I have accepted an opportunity that better aligns with my professional expertise and strategic vision. I wish the company success in its future endeavors. Regards, Harper Langston. 28 words that would detonate like a precision charge. No emotion, no accusations, just the devastating implications of recent changes to my role that legal would immediately flag as a non-compete violation on the company's part. I placed the envelope on Richard's desk, then sent the same letter via email to HR, copying legal and the entire executive team, including Ethan. By 7:15, I was in my office, packing the few personal items I actually cared about. The awards could stay dusty monuments to a person I no longer needed to be. But I took the photo of my team from last year's Christmas party, and the hand-carved pen Camille had given me when I'd closed my first $1 million analysis project. My phone started buzzing at 7:23. Jennifer from finance. What the hell, Harper? 7:26. Marcus from operations. Please tell me this is a joke. 7:29. 3 missed calls from HR. 7:31. Ethan Brooks standing in my doorway. Face the color of expensive Bordeaux. What the fuck do you think you're doing? He slammed the door behind him, all pretense of corporate civility gone. I continued packing, methodical and calm. I'm pursuing an opportunity that values strategic analysis over PowerPoint animations. I thought you'd understand, given your passion for transformation. You can't just... He stopped, the implications hitting him. The Vanguard contract? You vindictive bitch. This is about Vanguard. I have no idea what you're talking about. I sealed the box with tape, the sound sharp in the morning quiet. My decision is purely professional, as I'm sure yours was when you restructured my role without consultation. His phone rang. Richard's ringtone. Ethan fumbled to answer, and even from across the desk, I could hear our CEO's volcanic tone. Something about emergency board meeting, something about contract violation, something about $30 million. Ethan's face went from red to white as he listened. His eyes never left mine, and I saw the moment he understood. This wasn't just about leaving. This was about taking everything with me. I have to go, he said, backing toward the door like I was something dangerous. This isn't over. Oh, Ethan, I said, allowing myself the smallest smile. It's been over since the moment you called my work Fluff. You just didn't know it yet. After he fled, I finished packing in peace. Sarah Chen, no relation to anyone named Chen in our story, arrived at 7:45, eyes wide. Harper, what's happening? Ethan just ran past, looking like he'd seen a ghost. I'm leaving, I said simply. And if you're smart, you'll update your resume this weekend. Big changes coming. She studied my face, reading between the lines as all good analysts do. The Vanguard presentation, Camille Wright, oh my God. I can't discuss any of that, I said, which was answer enough. But Sarah, sometimes the best career move is knowing when to leave the table. By 800, I was walking out, box in hand. Richard Blackstone was running through the lobby, tie askew, bellowing into his phone about emergency meetings and contract clauses. He didn't even see me. Marcus Washington caught up with me at the elevator. Harper, wait, if you're going somewhere, if you need... I handed him a business card. Not mine, that would be too obvious. Just a black card with a phone number. Call this number Monday morning. Tell them Harper sent you. Be ready to discuss your salary expectations. His eyes widened. Is this... The opportunity of a lifetime, I finished. Don't waste it. The elevator doors closed on my old life. As I descended, my phone lit up with notifications. The news was already spreading through the corporate gossip network. By lunch, everyone would know that Harper Langston had walked out, leaving chaos in her wake. But the best part? This was just the opening move. Ethan Brooks thought he'd lost a contract and an employee. He had no idea he'd lost his entire foundation. Every competent analyst who'd been carrying his vision was about to get a better offer. Every client relationship built on actual expertise rather than empty charm would evaporate. The lobby security guard nodded again as I passed. Have a good weekend, Ms. Langston. Oh, I will, I said, stepping into the Manhattan morning. I absolutely will. Behind me, 42 floors up, an empire built on fluff was about to discover what happened when you removed the substance underneath, and I had a front row seat to watch it fall. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that makes Manhattan feel like a movie set. I watched the sunrise from my new corner office at Wright Strategic Ventures, 30 floors up in a building that made my old workplace look provincial. The coffee was better here. Everything was better here. My phone had been silent all weekend. I'd blocked every number from my former company. But Sarah Chen, Marcus Washington, and David Kim had all called the number I'd provided. By Sunday evening, all three had signed their offer letters. The exodus had begun. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, Camille walked into my office with 2 cups of espresso and a smile that could freeze hellfire. Ready for the show. She connected her laptop to my wall monitor, pulling up a video conference invite. Emergency board meeting at your former company. Richard was kind enough to include me, hoping to salvage the Vanguard relationship. He actually thinks you'll reconsider. Hope makes people stupid, she said, clicking Join Meeting. The screen filled with familiar faces, rendered unfamiliar by panic. Richard Blackstone looked like he'd aged 5 years over the weekend. The board members were arranged in their usual formation, but the tension was palpable even through pixels. And there, off to the side like a condemned man at his own trial, sat Ethan Brooks. Camille, Richard began, His usual commanding voice cracked around the edges. "Thank you for joining us. I want to personally apologize for last week's presentation. It didn't represent our capabilities." "No," Camille interrupted, her voice cutting through his platitudes like a surgical blade. "It represented them perfectly. That's the problem." Board member Janet Holloway leaned forward. "Ms. Wright, surely we can discuss terms." "The terms are simple. The contract is void. We've already engaged Wright Strategic Ventures for our analytical needs." Camille let that sink in. "Yes, the same firm that just hired your former Chief Data Strategy Officer and, as of this morning, 3 of your best analysts." The silence was beautiful. I watched Ethan's face cycle through the 5 stages of grief in real time. That's corporate espionage," he sputtered. "Poaching, we'll sue." "On what grounds?" Camille's smile was razored. "That you publicly diminished Harper's role, reducing her responsibilities without compensation adjustment, that you presented work to a client without the knowledge or approval of the person who created it. Please, Mr. Brooks, Sue, I'd love to see that discovery process." Richard held up a hand, trying to regain control. "What do you want?" "Camille." "Want nothing. I have everything I need. The team that actually understands data strategy now works for me. The Vanguard contract remains with WSV. This call is a courtesy. Nothing more." She paused, letting them marinate in their own desperation. "Although, Richard, you might want to review the rest of your client contracts. I believe several have key person clauses tied to Harper's involvement." I knew exactly which ones she meant. The Meridian Group, Castellan Industries, Phoenix Dynamics, all relationships I'd built, all contracts requiring my direct participation, roughly $60 million in annual revenue about to evaporate. CFO Michael Chen. Still no relation to any Chen in our narrative, cleared his throat. "We need to discuss immediate restructuring." "You need to discuss why you let a CMO with no analytical background destroy your data division," Camille corrected. "But that's no longer my concern. This call is over." She disconnected, leaving them staring at a black screen. "Brutal," I said, taking a sip of excellent espresso. "Necessary," she corrected. "Ethan Brooks represents everything wrong with corporate America. Style over substance, politics over performance. Men like him fail upward their entire careers, leaving destruction in their wake." My new office phone rang. Security announcing my 9:30 appointment. "Patricia Liu from Vanguard, here to discuss transition strategies." "One more thing," Camille said as she prepared to leave. "The brownstone. The sellers accepted your offer this morning. Congratulations." The day flew by in a blur of meetings, strategic planning, and the quiet satisfaction of building something real. Sarah, Marcus, and David arrived for orientation, their faces glowing with the particular joy of people who just tripled their salaries doing work they actually loved. Around 3:00 p.m., Jennifer from Finance, former Finance, now texted me. "Ethan just got escorted out. Security box and everything. Richard told him to be grateful they weren't pursuing legal action." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. The man who'd called my work Fluff was now carrying his own career in a cardboard box, while I sat in a corner office planning the analytical framework for a $100 million investment fund. That evening, as Manhattan glittered beneath my new office windows, I thought about silence, how I'd never raised my voice, never made a scene, never gave them anything they could use against me. Just carefully, methodically removed every pillar holding up Ethan Brooks' house of cards. Camille was right. The best revenge wasn't loud or dramatic. It was precise, strategic, and devastating. And it was only Monday. The emergency board meeting at my former company was scheduled for 2:00 p.m. Tuesday. I knew because Jennifer had been feeding me updates all Monday evening. Her loyalty to the company evaporating with each revelation of how badly Ethan had destroyed their client relationships. "Harper, you should see this place," she texted. "It's like watching a building collapse in slow motion. 3 more analysts resigned this morning. The Meridian Group pulled their contract. Richard looks like he hasn't slept since Friday." I didn't feel guilty. Guilt was for people who'd done something wrong. All I'd done was accept a better offer and tell the truth about my changed responsibilities. The dominoes falling now. Those were Ethan's creation. Tuesday at 1:45 p.m. I was reviewing predictive models with my new team when Camille appeared in my doorway. They're calling in 15 minutes. Want to watch the execution? I shouldn't. It was petty, unprofessional, even, but then I remembered Ethan's smirk as he'd called 6 weeks of meticulous work fluff. Pour me some of that excellent coffee, and I'm in. Camille's office was a testament to power earned rather than inherited. Original Basquiat on one wall, a Mapplethorpe photograph on another. The conference screen dominated the third wall, already showing the empty boardroom at my former company. They don't know I can see them, Camille explained. One-way video until the meeting starts. Richard wanted me to observe the full discussion. He's hoping for mercy. Will you give it? Watch and see. The board members filed in like pallbearers at their own funeral. Richard looked haggard, his usually perfect silver hair disheveled. CFO Michael Torres kept checking his phone, probably watching their stock price tumble in real time. And then, at exactly 200 hours, they wheeled in a conference phone like a prop from a vintage movie. Ethan wasn't there. Of course he wasn't. He'd already been fed to the wolves. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard began, his voice hollow. Thank you for joining this emergency session. As you know, we've experienced significant client departures following the resignation of Harper Langston and several key analysts. Board member Janet Holloway cut straight to the bone. $63 million in lost annual revenue. Richard, in 4 days, how did we get here? The CMO position, Richard started. The CMO you hired, Janet interrupted. Against the advisory committee's recommendation, the one who cost us Vanguard, Meridian, and God knows who else by the time this bleeding stops. Where is Brooks? Another board member, Thomas Craig, his voice sharp with accusation. Mr. Brooks' employment was terminated yesterday. We're reviewing potential legal action for misrepresentation of capabilities. Legal action. Janet's laugh was bitter. Against a CMO you let run wild. While our real talent walked out the door, Richard, the board has lost confidence in your leadership. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Even through the screen, I could see Richard's world cracking apart. I've been with this company for 15 years. And in 15 minutes, you won't be, Thomas Craig said. We've already drawn up the separation agreement. You can resign with dignity and a reasonable package. Or we can discuss cause, your choice. I watched Richard Blackstone, the man who'd let Ethan humiliate me in front of the entire leadership team, slowly deflate. I'll need to review the terms. You have until 5:00 p.m. Janet will serve as interim CEO while we search for someone who understands that data strategy isn't fluff. Thomas's eyes swept the room. Anyone else want to defend the decisions that got us here? Silence. Then we're done, Camille. If you're still on the line, the board would like to schedule a discussion about potentially rebuilding our relationship. Camille unmuted her end. Right Strategic Ventures isn't interested in relationships with companies that don't value expertise. However, I can recommend several firms that specialize in helping distressed companies. They're quite good with PowerPoint. She disconnected before they could respond. We sat in silence for a moment, watching the board members file out of their shattered kingdom. Richard remained seated, alone, staring at papers that probably detailed his golden parachute turning to lead. Excessive, Camille asked, though her tone suggested she didn't think so. Thorough, I corrected. Ethan lit the fuse, but Richard handed him the matches. They both chose style over substance. This is just the bill coming due. My phone buzzed. Marcus from my new team. Phoenix Dynamics just called. They want to move their entire portfolio to WSV. Should I set up a meeting? Another domino falling. By week's end, we'd probably capture another $40 million in contracts from companies who suddenly remembered the value of actual expertise. You know what the best part is? Camille said, standing to return to her own work. Ethan Brooks will spend the rest of his career as a case study in business schools. How to destroy a company in 5 days. The PowerPoint fluff disaster. His professional obituary will be 3 words: style over substance. I thought about that as I walked back to my office. Ethan was probably at home right now, updating his LinkedIn, trying to spin his termination into an opportunity. But in our incestuous industry, everyone already knew. The man who'd called data strategy fluff and lost $63 million in revenue wouldn't be getting calls from recruiters anytime soon. He'd wanted to be the face of modern business transformation. Now he was just not the way he'd imagined. The cautionary tale every company would remember when some smooth-talking executive tried to replace expertise with empty rhetoric. I settled back at my desk, pulling up the Phoenix Dynamics files. Real work, real data, real value, everything Ethan Brooks never understood and now never would. The city hummed outside my window, indifferent to the small dramas of corporate destruction, but for those of us who'd lived through it, who'd watched arrogance and ignorance finally face consequences, it was a beautiful Tuesday afternoon, the kind where justice wore a suit and carried a leather portfolio full of contracts worth more than Ethan Brooks would see in a lifetime. 6 months later, Wright Strategic Ventures had become the most feared and respected name in data analytics. We'd absorbed not just the Vanguard contract, but 17 others, building an empire on the foundation of actual expertise. The financial press called it the Harper effect. What happens when you put the right people in the right positions with the right resources? My brownstone in Brooklyn had become my sanctuary, its exposed brick walls lined with books on data theory and strategic analysis. Real books, not the airport leadership garbage Ethan used to quote. Every morning, I'd make coffee in my perfect kitchen and check the markets, watching our clients' portfolios grow based on models built on substance, not sparkle. The team had expanded to 35 analysts, each one handpicked for their ability to see through bullshit and deliver results. Sarah, Marcus, and David had become my senior partners, leading divisions that made their old jobs look like internships. We'd built something real, something that mattered. It was a Thursday afternoon when Camille called me into her office. The autumn light made Manhattan look like a golden promise, and she was standing at the window, bourbon in hand despite the early hour. "Remember when I told you the best revenge was precise, strategic, and devastating?" she asked without turning around. Every word. She handed me a printout from LinkedIn. Ethan Brooks' profile. His new position, assistant marketing manager at a medical supply company in New Jersey. Salary probably a third of what he'd made as CMO. His posts about transformative leadership journeys got single-digit likes, mostly from bots and his mother. From CMO to assistant manager in 6 months, Camille mused. That's almost impressive in its trajectory. I don't even think about him anymore, I said. And it was true. The man who derailed my career had become a footnote in my success story. Good, because I have something more interesting to discuss. She turned from the window, and I saw she was holding 2 glasses. The board wants me to take WSV public, billion-dollar valuation, conservative estimate. I'll need a CEO I can trust while I focus on strategic growth. My hand stilled on the glass she offered. Camille, you've earned it. Every client you've brought in, every model you've built, every hire you've made, the board was unanimous. She clinked her glass against mine. CEO Harper Langston has a nice ring to it. We drank in comfortable silence, the weight of the moment settling around us like expensive fabric, from PowerPoint decorator to CEO in 6 months, from Fluff creator to the person defining how an entire industry approached data strategy. One condition, I said finally. I want to establish a scholarship program for analysts from non-traditional backgrounds, the ones who have the talent but not the pedigree, the ones people like Ethan Brooks would overlook. Already budgeted for, Camille smiled. I knew you'd ask. That evening, there was a small celebration at the office. Nothing ostentatious, we weren't those people, just good champagne and better company, surrounded by the whiteboards covered in algorithms and projections that actually meant something. Jennifer had joined us 3 months ago, finally escaping the sinking ship of our former company. She raised her glass during the toasts. To Harper, who proved that the best revenge isn't getting mad, it's getting everything. As the party wound down, I found myself alone in my new CEO office, watching the city lights beginning to twinkle. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, probably spam, but I opened it anyway. Congratulations on the promotion, EB. Ethan Brooks, even in defeat, trying to insert himself into my moment. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. He didn't deserve words, not even cruel ones. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And I'd reached that blessed state where Ethan Brooks simply didn't exist in my universe anymore. I gathered my things, said goodnight to the security guard, and stepped out into the Manhattan evening. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to build something meaningful. But tonight, I'd go home to my brownstone, pour a glass of wine, and toast the beautiful truth Camille had taught me. When someone calls your work fluff, you don't argue, you don't raise your voice, you don't make scenes. You sharpen your knives, you wait for your moment, and then you take everything. The city hummed around me, full of Ethan Brookses who mistook noise for knowledge, style for substance. They'd learn, eventually, or they'd fail. Either way, I'd be building something real while they chased their PowerPoint dreams. Best fluff I ever invested in. Indeed. Thank you so much for listening to this story of sweet corporate revenge. I hope Harper's journey reminded you that sometimes the best response to disrespect is strategic silence, followed by decisive action. Where are you listening to this story from? Drop a comment below and let's connect. I'd love to know if you're tuning in from your office desk, during your commute, or perhaps plotting your own corporate checkmate. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice served cold, and share your thoughts on Harper's revenge. Have you ever dealt with an Ethan Brooks in your workplace? Let me know in the comments.